So how many plays does it take to become proficient with a board game? Not only in terms of strategy, but also unlocks and being able to play with less than optimal combinations or different configurations to really get the most out of the experience, whether it's core or you have some add-ons and various expansion packs. That's what we're going to explore in this vlog, and that's what we're going to take a look at in analysis of board gaming tactics. So Xenoshift is one of my favorite quick games to play. It's a lane defense game where you play mercenaries defending a mining operation on a remote world, and you have waves after waves of Xenos aliens attacking you, each with different strengths and abilities. You recruit units, you buy war gear, and you utilize various cards for strategies. The game is very, very challenging. It's not a very complex game in terms of the base rules, but when you get into the different combinations, the different abilities, how to spend resources, and the different types of monsters, Xenos, that you're going to randomly face, and there's an excellent selection. And that's on easy mode. Before we even look at some of the expansions, there was a significant learning curve. I got my butt kicked pretty impressively through a number of plays. But then I noticed something started to happen. I won a game here and there. Now, maybe it was random or I got an interesting combination that I pulled off. But then I learned the game and more the various combinations. Now, part of that is just, of course, from playing. But then there was this unlock where I was able to see more of the overall strategy and understand the mechanics in action. And I'm not talking about like playing it from a meta point of view, just min-max, but really be able to see what's viable and what's not. And of course, this is carried over into other games like Gloomhaven. You learn over time. So what I found is the first like 5 to 7 plays of most games, that's just the intro. I don't always even know what I'm doing. And certainly there's a level of different complexity with board games, and YouTube is an amazing resource to watch how a game is played. And rule books, for the most part, have gotten better over time, but you still have to kind of work things through. And we might have really, really heavy examples like Mage Knight, where you really, I love Mage Knight, but you really need someone physically to like initiate you into the game. There is a significant learning curve. Gloomhaven is a little bit challenging because it's just so much gloomy in the box and there's a lot to process. But even very, very simplified games, Runebound 2nd Edition, one of my favorite games, the first couple of plays, and it's not overly complex, and I don't mean that as a criticism, but the manipulation of the runes and the combinations and the powers as you attack and the monsters attack, it takes a little of understanding the order and the process and how to optimally use it. So I find those first couple of playthroughs, while I'm enjoying the game and exploring it and doing my best to win, it's really getting the flow of the game and understanding the rules. Once I have that, there's probably around another 10 plays where, enjoyably, it's just putting in the time. It's playing the game, seeing what it has to offer, and trying out different strategies back and forth. At that point, what I find is I develop a player personality. What do I really like about this game in terms of the tactics? Is there something that invokes a narrative or I can see myself playing? Sometimes those tactics are very, very powerful based on the rules. Other times, not so powerful. But you begin, I think, at that point when you're about 20 or so plays in, give or take, that you understand the base mechanics. You've seen enough of the real estate and the action of the game that you're aware of how it goes from stage to stage, even if it's a highly random game. You know, another great example, Pathfinder the Adventure card game, The Rise of the Rune Lords. This is a fantasy card-based game, or even, pulling in Lord of the Rings, pulling in that card-based game. There are a lot of cards that you build those decks, even replaying the game multiple times. It's going to take a long, long time to truly see everything. So you can't always count the cards. Talisman with all the expansions. Honestly, I've never flipped through all my Talisman cards. I regularly play all 4 expansions, big board expansions, small board expansions, everything included. I don't even know if I've seen all the cards in the game. I mean, that's like an exercise I need to do one day. And I've been playing Talisman for years, but literally stacks and stacks and stacks of cards. So the point I say this, in even games where there's a lot of random and a lot of cards, you don't necessarily need to see them all to adapt your player personality to understand how to leverage and play the game. Now, at that point, like Xenoshift, where on a given day, on a given draw, I can win more games than lose and still have an enjoyable time. Occasionally you get a bad draw or a couple of rounds of rolling the dice. If it's dice-based, you get slammed. This is where then we begin to explore things that are less optimal or crazy combinations. And I find at this point a rebirth, a regenesis of the game, meaning early on when you still don't really know the rules, everything is exciting. Everything is unknown. Then as you become familiar with the game, you've seen most of the real estate, but there's that thrill of like, hey, I'm getting closer to winning. Once it becomes extremely familiar and you're like, look, I've seen most of it. I know the strategy. The fun gets revisited. I mean, certainly you could step away for a little while, but the fun gets revisited in that now you're like, I'm going to take a party of all mages and we're going to blast out spells and see what can happen there. Xenoshift, I'm going to utilize some of the lesser war gear instead of the obvious weapon upgrades and mines and charges like that. I'm going to use some of the med packs. I'm going to use various ways of transporting different troops to different lanes and drones and things like that, where they're not optimal or not optimal depending on certain card combinations. But let's see how it is. Maybe I'll take the bases are dealt out randomly, but maybe I'll take a suboptimal base and see how it plays out. So I find then at this point where you have a level of proficiency where you can regularly win 9 out of 10, now the game becomes more fun because you get to try different character combinations or different ideas to see what can happen, pushing the game even more. How many plays till we are finally exhausted? How many plays to where you are an absolute veteran? Looking through, I do track all of my plays. I have them in a giant Excel sheet. Sometimes I do it right after playing, or other times it's literally like write down the play and the outcome on the back of an envelope and transcribe it later. I find about 50 or so games, 50 or 60 playthroughs. I think at that point you become kind of a real expert in that game, in the ability to adapt, to play, to teach, and at that point being able to take it and push it to that higher echelon.